Welcome to the Crazy Alchemist podcast, where alchemy, occultism, and strange history come alive.
Sometime during the reign of King Stephen, in that fractured period English historians call the Anarchy, the villagers of Woolpit found something beside one of their wolf pits that would generate 8 centuries of argument. The village took its name from these traps. Wolf's pits, wolf pit in Old English, were deep holes baited with carrion, dug to catch the predators that threatened livestock. The village sat in the flat agricultural landscape of western Suffolk, a place defined by its relationship with the earth, what you dug into it, what you pulled out, what sometimes climbed out on its own. What emerged that summer day was not a wolf. It was 2 children, a brother and a sister. Their skin was green. Their language was incomprehensible. Their clothes were cut from unfamiliar cloth, and they refused every food offered to them except raw broad beans still in their stalks, which they ate with desperate hunger. This was not a fairy tale. It was recorded as fact by 2 of the most respected chroniclers of 12th century England, writing independently, decades apart, and agreeing on nearly every detail. The first was William of Newburgh, an Augustinian canon writing his Historia rerum Anglicarum in the late 1190s. William was no credulous gossip. He is famous in medieval scholarship for calling Geoffrey of Monmouth a shameless fabricator, systematically dismantling the Historia regum Britanniae as fiction dressed as history. When William included the Green Children story, he did so with visible discomfort. He wrote that he had protracted doubts and found it absurd to accept as genuine, but he included it anyway. He said he was finally overwhelmed by the weighty testimony of so many reliable people. He closed with a phrase that says everything about his position. I am not ashamed to have described this unnatural and remarkable event. That is an unusual sentence for a historian to write. You don't say, I am not ashamed, unless part of you thinks you should be. Whatever we think of the Green Children, we should take seriously that this particular historian thought the evidence was too strong to ignore. The second account comes from Ralph of Coggeshall, abbot of a Cistercian monastery about 26 miles from Woolpit. Ralph had something William lacked, a named source. He claimed to have received his information from Sir Richard de Cown, the knight who actually took the children into his household. Historical records confirm Richard de Cown as a real person, appearing in legal documents between 1130 and 1160. His manor was about 6 miles north of Woolpit. So what actually happened? The children were found beside a wolf pit during harvest time. Brought to Sir Richard's manor, they wept at the sight of bread and meat, refusing anything until someone brought them raw broad beans still in their stalks, which they ate with desperation. Over time, they adapted to other foods. The green tint faded from their skin, but the boy, apparently the younger of the 2, remained sickly. He died shortly after baptism. The girl lived. She learned English. She was baptized. Ralph describes her as excessively wanton and impudent, a phrase that has generated its own small industry of interpretation. Was she sexually promiscuous? Simply rude? Or was she a woman who carried the strangeness of her origins too visibly in a society that expected deference from women, servants, and strangers? What we can say is that a girl who arrived speaking no English, eating only beans, with green skin and no known origin, managed to learn a new language, adapt to a radically different culture, and eventually marry a man at King's Lynn, about 40 miles north. When the girl learned enough English to describe where she came from, she told a story that has resisted easy explanation ever since. She and her brother had been herding their father's cattle. They heard bells. Following the sound, they entered a cavern. They walked for a long time through darkness, and when they emerged, they found themselves in a world of blinding sunlight and unbearable heat. She described her homeland as a place where the sun never fully rose. The light was perpetual twilight, neither full day nor full night. Ralph records that everything there was green. William adds the name. She called it St. Martin's Land. She said that across a considerable river, a luminous land was visible, but they could not reach it. Now, the green skin. Of all the details, this is the one that anchors the story in the mind. And in medieval England, green was not a neutral color. Green was the color of the fairy world. In Celtic and English folklore, the good folk dressed in green. In parts of Scotland, wearing green was considered genuinely dangerous, an intrusion on fairy territory. Green was the color of the green man, those foliate heads carved into church stonework across England, vegetation sprouting from the human face, life emerging from the inanimate. And green was the color of decay. Bodies turn green in death. Stagnant water greens. Copper corrodes to green. The same color that signifies new growth also signifies rot. The children's green skin places them at the intersection of all these associations: fairy, vegetation, death, rebirth, the other world. And then there are the beans. The children would eat nothing but raw broad beans. This is not a random dietary preference. It is one of the oldest symbolic associations in the Western world. Around 500 BCE, Pythagoras forbade his followers from eating fava beans. Aristotle recorded that beans resemble the gates of Hades because they are the only plant with jointless stems, providing an unbroken passage between the earth and the underworld. Pliny the Elder reported that Pythagoreans believed fava beans contained the souls of the dead because the plant's hollow stems served as ladders for human souls between the earth and Hades. The Romans formalized this connection in the Lemuria festival, held on May 9, 11, and 13 each year. At midnight, the head of the household walked barefoot through his home, took black beans in his mouth, and spat them out behind him, repeating 9 times, "With these beans I redeem me and mine." The hungry dead, the lemures, would gather the beans in darkness. The logic is transactional. The beans are payment. The dead accept them because beans belong to their realm. This association survived into Christian Europe. On the night before All Souls' Day, children in Italy received cookies shaped as broad beans, fave de morti, beans of the dead. Katharine Briggs, the great scholar of English fairy lore, saw the connection plainly. She noted that the habitual food of the children was beans, the food of the dead. Consider the full picture. 2 children emerge from underground. Their skin is the color of growing and decaying things. They speak no known language, and the only food they will accept is the food that, across 2,500 years of tradition, belongs to the dead. The underground passage itself is another thread that runs deep. Gerald of Wales, writing within a few years of William of Newburgh, tells the story of a Welsh boy named Eladir who fled his teacher and hid under a riverbank. 2 small men offered to lead him to a land of playtime and pleasure. He followed them through a dark passage into a country that was beautiful but not lit by the full light of the sun. It existed in perpetual twilight. The structural parallels are obvious: the underground passage, the twilight land, the linguistic difference, the inability to return. But the direction is reversed. Eladir travels from our world to the other. The green children travel from the other world to ours. It is the same door, swinging both ways. now the most popular modern explanation. In 1998, historian Paul Harris proposed that the children were Flemish refugees. Flemish immigrants had settled in eastern England, and under Henry II they faced growing hostility. In 1173, the Battle of Fortean became a massacre. Thousands of Flemings were killed near Bury St. Edmunds. Harris connected the dots. Fortean St. Martin, a village near the battlefield, could be St. Martin's Land. Orphaned children, malnourished, speaking only Flemish, might have wandered to Woolpit. The green skin? Harris pointed to chlorosis, iron deficiency anemia, which can produce a greenish tinge.
The theory is appealing, but there are problems. William of Newburgh places the events during King Stephen's reign, which ended in 1154. The Battle of Fornham occurred in 1173, nearly 2 decades later, and Sir Richard de Calne, an educated knight in wool-trading East Anglia, would likely have encountered Flemish speakers. Why would he fail to recognize the language? The chlorosis explanation is medically plausible, but the chroniclers describe the children as strikingly green, not subtly tinted. Every theory explains part of the story and fails on the rest. If the children were Flemish refugees, the green skin has no satisfying explanation, and the chronology does not align. If they were fairy children, we must explain how they adapted to mortal food and integrated into human society. If the story was folklore encoded in the language of chronicle, we must explain why 2 of medieval England's most careful historians both recorded it as fact, independently, with a named source between them. Something happened in Woolpit during the anarchy. 2 children appeared from somewhere. They were green, they ate beans, one died, one survived, and told a story about a twilight land called St. Martin's, separated from ours by nothing more than a long walk through the dark. The most truthful thing we can say about the green children 8 centuries later is what William of Newburgh said at the time. The event is unnatural, remarkable, and impossible to fully explain. The evidence exists, the patterns are there, the resolution is not, and the honest response to that is not to force a conclusion, but to keep the question open. If you enjoyed this, subscribe and leave a comment. The full article with sources is linked in the description. Until next time.
If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to visit crazyalchemist.com for more intriguing content and follow Crazy Alchemist on Instagram and Facebook to stay connected.